We are up to where? What else are we up to? Huh?
The end of Isaiah or Isaiah, I don't remember.
No, we're up to Isvav. Yeah. We're up to Isvav, chapter 6, page Kuf Mem Gimel in the original Maimer. Okay, so let's identify, because I'm seeing from the questions that this is required, just to lay this down very simply for everybody, and that will help your understanding. So, and that is as follows. We're identifying here three levels in general. Three levels in general of the Ratzon Hashem. And that is, if these words will help clarify, because the word infinite is being thrown around and it's a relative term. So we're talking about the essential will, the infinite will, the particular will. That's what we're talking about here. Eidos embodies the essential will. Chokim embodies a general will, and Mishpatim a particular will. That the difference between them are that the essential will speaks of the self. It isn't about fixing, engaging, or even acquiring, as it were, something else. And then the general will is still very much bound up with the self, but still deals with something outside of self that would allow self-expression. And the particular will actually engages the outside. So the three levels not negates the outside, the other, but engages the other. So to rephrase that again, there's the essential self, or the essential will, the Ratzon Atzmi. The second level is a will that is expressed to negate an obstacle to that. And the third level, the lowest level, is a will that actually engages the other, doesn't negate the other, but engages the other. So these are the three levels in the mitzvahs. There's the Ratzon Atzmi of the mitzvah that transcends agenda. It's like the I am. This will is akin to I am, not even I want. It's closest to I am. That's embodied in the Eidos. Then the level of Chukim of all mitzvahs expresses Hashem's desire to negate the sense of independence that creation has. As he explained at length, all of that expressed in the metaphor of engraving, which was dealt with at length right in the beginning of this chapter. And then there's Mishpatim, which Mishpatim don't negate, but Mishpatim fill creation, fill the recipient, fill the person with understanding, feeling, etc. So again, in terms of the person, we'll leave Eidos for the last in our present discussion right now, because he's going to deal with it. In this paragraph now, the purpose of Chukim is to negate self, to humble self. The purpose of Mishpatim is to engage self. What do we want to negate in Chukim? We want to negate and make clear the limits of intellect, our paucity and limitation in the face of Hashem, period. That's what Chukim does. That in the face of God, to recognize our insignificance and our limitation. That's a meditation and a consciousness, and that's what Chukim engenders. When confronted by this is beyond understanding component of each mitzvah, that's what it does. It makes us recognize our own limitations and how God is beyond us. Mishpatim, of course, fills us with understanding and appreciation and feeling for the mitzvahs. The Eidus component simply connects us to the very essence of God. And how does that work? What's the mechanism there? We're now going to see. The answer is there's no mechanism. As he said before, we already made this point before, it's because it's Hashem's will that we connect to His essence, therefore it happens. It's not through any avodah on our part, other than the actual fulfillment of the mitzvah. But it's not through consciousness or through transcending consciousness or through reason or transcending reason. It's by virtue of the fact that God wants. Now to take that deep, I'm going to give you a heads up where this is going now. You'll understand it. We started off this morning saying that the inyan, that the level of Eidus, this is rotzen atzmi. It's an essential will, as opposed to chukim, which is not chukim, which is a will that is manifest in order to achieve the negation or the humbling of the intellect of the human being in the face of God, and the mishpat begins to engage him. So what's Eidus? How is Eidus? What's the connection to Eidus within the person? Where's the parallel of Eidus? Chukim is, I recognize it's beyond me. Mishpatim is, I appreciate that which I understand about all of this. So where in me is the Eidus? How do I, there's no tool, but where is it in me? And the answer is, that's because that's who you are, in fact. The Eidus expresses the I am of a Yid. That's what Eidus expresses. That we have a neshama that's a part of Hashem. And the will of Hashem, what comes out, now the Maimon does not say these words at all, but this is what emerges. What comes out is that the will of Hashem embodied in Eidus, which is not about any agenda or otherness at all. It's about what? The I am of God. So where's that expressed? In the I am of a Jew, which is not otherness. The I am of a neshama is indeed not something other. The I am Eidus level of the neshama is in fact a chelek lekami mal mamash. And that's what Hashem desires, which means I desire me, really. To make it very clear for the reader to understand what is going on here. This means I want me. That's what Eidus is. Or I want you, the Yid, because you are a part of me. That's not a gilui dika rotzen. In other words, a rotzen that which wants to acquire or fix or get or engage something other outside of self. It isn't. It's the very self, atzmos, itself kavayochel, because atem eida, you are all my witnesses. You all bear testimony to me by your very being. The very being of a Yid, his very existence, the core existence of his being, expresses the very being of the Eibishter inseparably. And that's the Atem Eidai. And therefore, you don't have to do anything. Just do the mitzvah. You're a Yid. You express the Ratzon Atzmi of the Eibishter. Because you are. Your very essence, the very essence of you doesn't have to be negated, fixed, or engaged, or otherwise, or anything. It is. So the Eidus prophet, the Eidus component of the mitzvah brings out the I am a Yid. It expresses the I am a Yid, which is one with the I am of Hashem. Okay, and all of these words, let's get a kind of a formula of simple words and language that we could, whatever we're learning, we can place on that. Otherwise, we're going to get totally thrown and infinite and things flying lost in space. It's the three levels of the Ratzon, the essential Ratzon, I'm saying in different words now, but it's all the same thing. The essential Ratzon, then there's a transcendent or infinite Ratzon, the objective of which is to make us recognize our limitations and open up consciously to the grandeur and beyond the truth of God. And then there's the particular Ratzon, the Mishpatim, that are to suffuse and engage us with understanding and appreciation of his mitzvahs, all their reasons, etc. We're far from understanding fully appreciating what the Ben Chacham is asking, but we're building our case. Now, what he's really asking. Now continuing Ois Vav. Just like above. The difference between Eidos Chukim Mishpatim is the Chukim Mishpatim are Shaykh Lo'olamus. But Chukim Mishpatim are a revelation that is already related to creation. In other words, a revelation where relative to which creation has some value. Ella, in the square brackets, the distinction between the two is, as we've explained, Mishpatim ba'ir mislabish ba'olamus. Mishpatim addresses the oil invested in creation, where not just some value, but valuable, period. And Chukim express the oil which is higher than investure, soivev, the purpose of which is to carve out, as we said earlier, creation's sense of independence and not just independence, but the sense of intellect reigns supreme. Chukim humble that. So Chukim and Eidos expresses the essence of the cause, the essence of the will higher altogether than the worlds, even higher than higher. Beyond, as explained earlier. Now translating this in the service of man. The Chukim Mishpatim and B'Seichel Sheba'adam. Chukim and Mishpatim both address consciousness, rationale. In brackets. Well, obviously, Chukim not quite, yes. He acknowledges that. If we're not talking direct, hardcore intellect, we're talking about a level that is related to intellect. Because the appreciation that God is beyond understanding and beyond all description, that itself is apprehended intellectually. So that's shaykh to seichel. So we're talking his bondedness, we're talking in meditation. In the square brackets, further elucidation and summary. In mishpatim, what's the person thinking about? He's thinking about the particular reason for the mitzvah. He's also thinking, he's also considering and thinking about and learning and discovering and understanding that even, as we said earlier, a couple of days ago, even the chukim also have their reasons. Now that statement was misleading. It's not that the chukim have their reasons. That's not a fair statement. Why is that wrong? Anybody? That made it sound like that the reason is the justification of the chukim. That's not so. The reason is not the justification for any of the mitzvahs. Chukim yesh lam tam means, anybody wants to say? What does mean the chukim yesh lam tam? He's chas v'shalom not saying that chukim have their reasons, we just don't know them. God has his reasons. That's not what he's saying. What is he saying?
The reason is to transcend the mind.
No. That's the agenda of chukim. He's not speaking tam mamish.
Oh.
Correct. That's the agenda. The agenda of chukim is bittul of seichel. But now you're saying chukim yesh lam tam. It means pashut outright seichel reason. What does he mean by that? So it's not what again, I'll say what it is not. These chukim have a reason. We don't know. God has his reason. But there are reasons. We just don't know them. Not so. God forbid. That's not what he's saying. So what is he saying?
That it's the exact opposite, that we have no right to contemplate.
No, you're not answering my question. What does it mean that chukim yesh lem tam? Okay, let me tell you. As he said earlier, that all of the mitzvahs have all three elements. That chukim, which are primarily a gilui of Eira Soivev, nonetheless descend through Yishalcha and acquire on some external level at least, some elements of reason. So at the lower level, they are enclosed in reason. It's just what dominates is that which is beyond reason. Okay, let's revisit that because this needs, I think, more clarification. The point we made earlier in the Maamar, this is the pivotal insight upon which the whole Maamar revolves, is that all mitzvahs have all three components. All mitzvahs are simultaneously edus, all mitzvahs are chukim, and all mitzvahs are mishpatim. Which means all mitzvahs embody the essential will. All mitzvahs have the aspect in them that negates and humbles intellect, and all mitzvahs have the dimension that can be grasped and understood. That's the mishpatim. That's the time he's talking about here. And this corresponds to, friends, the whole Yishalcha, this atzmus eidin sof. That's where edus are rooted. Chukim are rooted in the Eir HaSovev. And mishpatim are rooted in Seder Yishalcha, the four elements. And that's why there are four classic reasons to all mitzvahs. From the top down, Soid, and then Drush, and then Remez and then Pshat. That's the four elements of Atzilis, Bri, Yitzir, and Asiyah, corresponding to the four letters of Hashem's name. So the essential will travels, as it were, to use very physical language because we have no choice. But I hope that you, the listener, are endeavoring to divest the concepts from the corporeal language, but we only have language, so we have no choice. So the divine will descends down, as it were, through this whole process. From the, like, how does this Yishalcha come into being? The truth is that neshamas, which we speak about now, are the parallel. Neshamas are quite the same parallel as Torah that we're describing right now. Neshamas are rooted in Atzmos. Then obviously, to get into the guf, so the neshama travels this whole journey through the Eidin Sof and through Atzilus and all the way down into the guf. Now, neshamas are a good example, as we learn in Tanya in Perek Beis, that the Alter Rebbe asks there in Tanya, if all neshamas are rooted in Atzmos, how come the different levels? How come the different levels? They're all chelik l'kamim al mamish. And what's the Alter Rebbe's answer? The journey. So all neshamas descend from Atzmos into the guf. The difference is, to put things very somewhat crudely, as the neshama descends through this whole process, from first the infinite revelation and then the finite revelations, to what degree is the neshama affected? Is it invested at each level as it passes down through, or simply marginally acquires the limitations that these worlds will give the neshama so that it can be a finite entity enclosed in the body at the end of the day, which is the divine intent? So the lofty neshamas, there's the neshamas of Atzilus and the Bria, and even higher still, as it were. These are neshamas that they do descend, and they're in Olam Hazeh, and so they acquire all of the limitations required for neshama to negotiate this world, which is 10 sviris and 10 koiches, or 10 koiches corresponding to 10 sviris, etc. Speech, language, action, all of these things. But then some neshamas walking around in Olam Hazeh that are marginally affected by any of these limitations and retain, to one degree or another, the purity of whichever level defines them. So you have neshamas of Atzilus, neshamas of Biyan, neshamas of Toyin, neshamas of Tikkun, etc., etc. But all neshamas, of course, have everything. All neshamas have everything. All chelik kamim mal mamish, the etzem. They all have the Eir HaSovev in them, the faculties of Hayd and Seichel. They all have the Eser Koiches, Seichel and Midas, etc., etc. But yet there's a great difference between one neshama and the other. In the difference lies in which aspects dominate. The same is true of mitzvahs. All mitzvahs have all three dimensions. So why some mitzvahs are edus? Because what dominates these mitzvahs, as we explained, without repeating this now, what dominates the edus is not the seichel, not the higher than seichel, but the atzmisdika quality. That's what dominates. Although there is aspects of seichel, and there is aspects of beyond seichel in the edus. In fact, exquisitely so, because it wants to bring out, edus expresses how atzmos is higher than infinite and finite, and therefore edus equally, as it were, contain no explanation and explanation. And then you have chukim that are dominantly defies explanation. But as we demonstrated a couple of days ago, when you probe the chukim, there are profound insights at the chukim. There's this seichel in chukim. And likewise mishpatim. Mishpatim dominantly is purely logical, you shall not kill, and so on appearance. But in every one of these mitzvahs, probing the details, we have to confront that which is totally beyond understanding. But that's not overt, that's subtle, that's present, but not overt. Just like neshamas, who descend through Seder Yishalcha, is exactly the same thing. All neshamas possess everything, but they differ widely and drastically even in terms of their dominant conscious characteristics. And the reason for all of this is because the Ratzon has descended through all of these levels. From the Ratzon Atzmit Elam Hazeh, to put on film, to put Aduma, to Shatnez, words written on a paper in a Shulchan Aruch to observe. And the difference between one mitzvah and another is what is its dominant. So in the words of, in the way to describe it in the Neshamas is, as the Neshamas descend, there's two ways to descend. There's two ways to descend, there's two ways to journey. Derech Maivir and Derech Islapshus. Passing through or being invested. So the physical, crude example is when you're traveling from one place to another and you spend some time in one place. So one person who is there, he acquires the entire mindset of the whole society. Spending time there, he becomes totally invested and becomes part of that society, that way of thinking, its culture. He absorbs its culture and internalizes it and becomes part of the culture. Another person can be there 50, 60 years. He knows the culture, knows the language, everything, but he's never part of it. Completely engaged in it. And Emerson, that's the Yid in Golos. Here we are in Golos, Canadians, Poles, Germans, Australians, Americans, Russians. So on the one hand, we're expected to be part of the society, to know the language, engage, etc. But it should all be derech maivir. It doesn't define us, not culture, not in essence, not bepnimius, although we have all the external trappings of what's required to live a functional and contributing life. But he's here b'derech maivir, not b'derech islapshus. It doesn't define him. I'm a Jew living in Canada, and therefore I'm a Canadian. Or Australia, or anywhere in Olam Hazeh. I'm not part of Olam Hazeh. And as I keep on, we always point out, if we ever forget that, the non-Jew reminds us that we're a foreigner and a stranger. We can live in the same country for 500 years, contribute to its culture, its science, politics, music, and art like no other, and on a dime we are a foreigner. Because we are. We're here on a shlichus and a mission to make this world a home for God. We're not part of the scene. We're sent here on a mission. So we're here, b'derech maivir, not islapshus. That's just emotional. It's emotion of what we're saying. So this is the differentiation between one mitzvah and the other. Whether its primary property is the edus, the essence, retaining that purity, even as the divine will descends all the way through the olamus. And because the divine will of edus descends through the entire process, it will acquire the chukim property, it will acquire the mishpatim quality. But what remains dominant is the edus property. And other mitzvahs by divine will, Hashem wants to be mislabish in Eira Soviv, and to acquire, not maivir, be mislabish. And then there's the will, the some mitzvah Hashem desires, it should be mislabish and ishtalshalus. And its dominant characteristic should be understanding and knowledge and being edifying and explaining and filling. And then as you probe deeper, you see it's beyond. And you probe deeper, there's the essence. But they're not the dominant characteristics. But all mitzvahs contain, again, all three. So therefore, continuing now. So when he said, the line I just said before, let's see it again. So with Seich, we're in the square brackets here. We're in the square brackets. Just a word of caution. When I've spoken about neshamas, don't cross-pollinate the ideas because it's going to confuse you. That was in parentheses, put it aside to revisit independently. which, with the danger of making a chant out of all of this and creating havoc in all the concepts. We don't want to do that. All right. So the last point now again. So the Eidos and Mishpatim engage the person's seichel, in brackets. Again, the square brackets. Mishpatim is bonus so betime my mitzvahs. Mishpatim, we are appreciating, engaging the reasons of the mitzvahs. And the chiddush is not just those mitzvahs that are overtly mishpatim, for sure. Also appreciating that chukim also have reasons. Again, what that means is not the conventional, before you learn Chassidus, God has his reasons, we don't know them, so we'll do them anyway. It's the opposite. The beauty of the mitzvah is that it doesn't have reason. And so chukim has a reason because, like everything, it's invested in Eilam in Yishalcha, so it acquired a reason. So chukim also have reason. Huh?
You look at footnote 43, it seems to be saying the opposite.
No, well, we'll see that soon. No, it's saying what we're saying.
Okay.
But the tam is not revealed. Chachma means it's in subtle points. Now, the truth is, this little statement is a bit hard to understand because it is nimshach and seichel and ivroim. There is element of reason. I guess he means here in the same way, not like mishpatim, where you learn mishpatim, the seichel could say, this is why do mishpatim? For these reasons. That's the whole justification. But when it comes to, right, don't kill, because if you kill, society is destroyed, it's over. So that seichel could say, and is justified by saying, that this is the justification of the mitzvah. But by chukim, any elements of insight that we see are not, the seichel cannot say, well, that's why the totality of the mitzvah is there, because there's so much to it that's beyond understanding. You follow? You follow what I just said? Because overtly it's beyond understanding. And that's what he means. I'm asking the question. He says, we just were saying now for days and minutes ago, right now, that even in chukim there's elements of seichel. So what does it mean? It's not drawn down into the intellect of creation. So I just answered why. Not drawn down in the same way that seichel of mishpatim, which in the world of mishpatim totally defined what it is. It's not true of chukim. It's only elements of understanding there, not the totality of the mitzvah. Someone, a comment?
Just when he says that what does it say here? That it's in Chachmas Yisbarach or Hashem's Chachma, but we don't grasp that. I'm not sure how I follow why that excludes the concept of in the Mishpatim aspect of Chukim, that Hashem has his own very good reason for in his Chachma why a mitzvah needs to be a certain way, even though it doesn't come, that reason doesn't come down here.
Because the chukim aspect is about bittul aseichel. The chukim component is l'maylim and aseichel, and it's the bittul of seichel. Not an so. Tzorich Ian, I acknowledge that Tzorich Ian here a little bit, because when he says in the ha'orah, I don't want to confuse us by getting into the order, but what you're talking about, she'ein time on your dua. The fish nimshach b'seichel nivroim. So that begs the question, a very simple question. If the reason isn't known, it's not drawn down to us, but there is one, then why have one to begin with? What's the point? What's the point of it? Who gains from it? Nimshach b'seichel nivroim. So this very reason that we're talking about is the infinite property, the bittul aseichel. That is this higher tam. That is the higher tam. Now it could be that even that, I'm just thinking, yesh loymar, even that, because infinite is relative, is nimshach in some kind of tam relative to lamaila. But for us, it's bligvul and negates seichel. So it may have some strata of relative limitation. But since it's beyond Alken, it's Mevatelas confronting that. That's probably true because in the Avodah, I want to just going to throw this out on the table. In the Avodah of Bittul HaSeichel, it's all relative. The Bittul HaSeichel for one level is not the same for the other. For one person, what's beyond intellect, for another, it's graspable. So that's l'chayda what this means here. They are all levels of the kavanah is to induce Bittul HaSeichel, but then there's levels of this which are graspable, only then to confront a higher level of Bittul until the process continues. You follow? Again, to make this simple, one person's element of faith is somebody else's absolute rationale because of his greater intellect. Huh?
So are these categories at a surface Olam Hazeh perspective? Because, as we said, if you probe layers of a mishpat, there's stuff that don't make sense. I'll be safer. And
Right.
the opposite, if you probe layers of the chayk, there's the most beautiful of deep reasons.
Right.
So now it seems that these categories are just a surface Olam Hazeh perspective, but are they what they are because of their source?
In Yishalcha, how the Rotzen Atzmi traveled down to Olam Hazeh. B'derech Ma'ivir through Olamus, b'derech Islapshus through
They're all the
Olamus.
same in their source, but rather on our perspective.
Well, in the source,
one comes out of Mishkan.
it's the same like Neshamas. The Neshamas are the source of Chelik Lekam Imal Mamish, but in the journey to the Guf Olam Hazeh, there's a very different journey of each Neshama, giving rise to a different level of Neshama, different character. Same thing. So it's all, the differences are determined by the nature of the projection of the essential will to us in Olam Hazeh, the journey of that will, through Yishalcha, through the Olamus and through the Eitzah before that, the Olam Atoyu, the whole gamut of the whole Seder Yishalcha and beyond Seder Yishalcha. Direct, marginal descent, invested descent, affected profoundly or marginally, again, derech ma'ivir b'derech islapshus, passing through or invested. Okay? Yeah, we need to do a lot of thinking, friends. With the Maimer in front of us, the words of the Maimer. Okay, we're already at 8 o'clock, and today's Rosh Chodesh. What he's going to get to, we didn't finish the square brackets. The Eidos, again, as we started off the shir today, that the Eidos component, how does the Yid connect to the Eidos component? Not with his Seichel and not with his Bittul of his Seichel, but the fact that he's a Yid. And no, there's no avodah required there. You are. So you do it, and therefore you are connected. As we explained at the beginning of the shir, those who missed the beginning, it's critical that you hear it. Otherwise, it's all based on it's all floating in space. So I encourage you to hear the beginning of the shir for clarity on this. All right, folks.
Shouldn't that be the reason of every mitzvah? Yeah.
Pardon?
Shouldn't that be the primary reason to do it every mitzvah? Mishpat, Zohar?
The atom.
Atzmos?
Yeah, that's again, we're getting to the Chachma's question with that. That was all to lead us to his question. This is, we'll see, a very profound part of his question. Okay?